Okay, guys, so in this class, we're going to talk about nonverbal communication, how we use our body language, how we use our body gesture, social distance, movement to communicate. So first, let's define what is nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is the intentional or unintentional transmission of meaning through non-spoken physical and behavioral cues. So here I want to highlight or elaborate on these two terms, intentional or unintentional. So in last class, we talked about the verbal communication. But for verbal communication, most of it is intentional because you would have a goal ahead of it, and then you want to plan this conversation ahead of time. So this most verbal communication would be intentional. However, this nonverbal communication, it could be intentional, it could also be unintentional. Let me elaborate on it a little bit. So let's say we are having a party in a room and I found a guy really attractive. What's even better, I noticed that he is winking at me. So apparently, he is using this winking behavior to show his interest in me. So apparently, he is intentionally using this winking nonverbal behavior to communicate with me. And sometimes this nonverbal communication can also be unintentional. So let's say again, we're having a party and I found a guy, he's really attractive, he's really hot. And suddenly I noticed that he is winking at me. So I kind of approached him and I talked to him. I thought that he was interested in me. But after kind of having a short conversation with him, I found out that he was winking. It just because he got something into his eyes, so he was kind of blinking to get things out of his eyes. So in this situation, of course, I'm embarrassed. This is still nonverbal communication. Even though this message sender does not have an intention to communicate, but I mistakenly thought that he was communicating with me. Again, I got some meaning, I got some signals from this nonverbal behavior, even though it is not his intention to communicate with me, but I draw some meaning from it. I gave it some kind of interpretations. So in this case, we still call it nonverbal communication because there is some meaning being delivered in this communication. So I hope this clarifies this definition for nonverbal communication. Unlike verbal communication, nonverbal communication can be both intentional and unintentional. So this is a definition of nonverbal communication, and let's take a look at what types of nonverbal communication codes we could have. Well, in general, there are 8 different types of nonverbal codes for transmitting information. I'll first go through these 8 types of code briefly, and then we're gonna focus on 5 of them for today's class. The first type of nonverbal communication, we call it kinesics, and this includes all the body movement we could have, such as our body gesture and posture. The body movement, our facial expressions, and even your eye contact. Second one, we call it haptics. That refers to all the touch we conduct in our daily interactions. We're gonna elaborate on it a little bit in this class. The third one, we call it vocalics, or sometimes we call it paralanguage. And this includes all the vocal cues we have. So in last class, we talked about the verbal message, that is what we say, the content of our communication, of our conversation. But this vocalics is not does not refer to what we say, but it is how we deliver this information, how we convey this message. And this could include lots of dimensions, such as our pitch, how high or low our voice is, how fast we speak, and it could even include silence. Sometimes people use silence to show their emotions, such as, anger, even sadness. The fourth one we call it proxemics, that is your personal space. That is how people use the space and the distance to communicate their relationships and some other stuff. So we seldom think about it, but it is a really important factor in our interpersonal communication. I'll show you guys some examples when we get there. Well, the fifth one is the environment, and this refers to one's physical settings. Well, if you want to have a quick understanding about a person's personality, well, the best place you may want to go is this person's bedroom. Well, you can look around this person's bedroom, and this can help you have a quick look of this person's personalities, whether he's an organized or messy person. What are his hobbies and interests, etc. So the environment is really important. The sixth one is our physical appearance. That refers to how we dress ourselves, how we look like, including our height, clothing, body type, and some other physical features. So here, let me give you one example how people use this physical appearance to communicate. We know that the definition of physical beauty is different from culture to culture. While in the Western countries, I would say we value a fit body, right? Not too skinny, not too fat. We want to have a really kind of a fit body. But in some African cultures, especially a country called Mauritania, they would value obesity. So from their understanding, carrying extra weight can communicate that you are wealthy enough to eat what you want. So the teenager girls are forced to consume a lot of calories per day, pretty much like 16,000 calories per day. That is 25 burgers. So these teenager girls are facing serious cardio and blood problems. So I don't want to say this is right or wrong, but I will say this is an example how people use physical appearance to communicate their economic or social status. The seventh nonverbal code is chronomics. That is how people perceive and manage time. While some cultures, they value punctuality. They want to be on time for all meetings and appointments. And people with such a kind of a time management perspective, they would work ahead on schedules and they would stick to it. But some other cultures tend to have an opposite perspective towards time. These cultures have a less formal perception of time. So they don't like calendars or schedules. They like to be spontaneous. So instead of strictly sticking to a schedule, they are more flexible. So they don't have a calendar to stick with, and they can multitask for lots of time. For example, they would keep an open door and welcome interruptions at any time. So these are the two general ways for people to manage to perceive time. We call it chronomics. The last one type of nonverbal code is artifacts. That is, we use the objects or articles we possess to communicate our status. So we are gonna talk a little bit more for these artifacts. So I'll skip it here. So we have just kind of briefly overviewed these 8 types of nonverbal code. And your textbook did a very good job explaining the environment, the physical appearance, and the chronomics. And I think they are pretty straightforward. So for this class, we're going to focus on 5 these nonverbal codes. They are kinesics, haptics, vocalics, proxemics, and artifacts. So I'll give you guys the definition, and I'll give you guys some examples how we use these 5 types of nonverbal code to communicate. So before move on, I'm gonna ask you guys to watch a really funny video interview. So let's take a look at this talk show by Jimmy Kimmel and see how interview or how he talked with 2 kids. And when you watch this really funny video, please pay attention to these 2 kids, their nonverbal codes. So we've discussed these 8 types of nonverbal cues. So my question is how these 2 kids use these 8 types of nonverbal codes to communicate their relationship, their emotions, and their thoughts in this video. So please click the video below and watch it, and then come back to our lecture.